Welcome to Actions and Limits. My name is Justin Atherton. I'm the Peak Performance Consultant for Confidence Unchained. With me as always is Paul Fortune. Paul is a mindset coach and the founder of A Call to Action. And together we make Actions and Limits. Welcome to the show, the podcast where we talk about the actions we can take and the limits we create. Another show, Paul. Excited for our guest, Matt Zinman, to come on later. And we're still in lockdown. Some of the states are slowly starting to get off of this. But I want to ask you, man, like, what are you doing for your own mental health during this whole process? Like, what have you been doing for yourself, man?
Well, it's tough because you see, Justin, you're living in Texas, and the restrictions are different than where I'm in California.
Mm-hmm.
We don't need to get into the politics of it, but there's just different climate, different rules and regulations. So it's hard for the business owners that they have to adapt, especially the brick and mortar businesses on adapting to this new environment. On doing business. I would say the worst hit would be the restaurant and bar industry for us, because a lot of the restaurants are open for takeout, but obviously the income stream from takeout to a full service restaurant is a night and day, probably not making enough to cover the bills and such. So it's really tough mentally, I would imagine, for a lot of local businesses to to stay positive. But we've talked about things in the past, and it's crucial right now is to really hone in on the things that are going right for you. So if you're that business owner that's losing money, you might think about, well, I have my health. I never got the disease, the COVID-19. My family is healthy, and that's the number one thing. If you're healthy, that's the number one commodity is health. I mean, you look at Steve Jobs, who passed away. I mean, I'm sure he would give away his fortune to still stay alive right now. So we got to put things in perspective. And if you are sick or whatnot, think about things that are going right. Maybe it's the family that's reaching out to you, that's supporting you while you're sick, or whatever it is. But try to focusing on the positive things that are going right in your life. So that's what I would say, and that's what I do in my life. I'm sorry, I kind of mixed the question a little bit, but that's what I'm doing.
You've talked about it before, having that gratitude, waking up and saying, like, what am I grateful for today? Because, we are all in a tough situation, and some, more than others. But if you can focus on those things that are going right, what are you grateful for? That can be a huge help, in people's mental health, rather than just focusing on the negative and watching the news and just focusing on all this negative things that are coming in. Turn it around and be like, no, what am I, grateful for? My health, my family, my friends, that's a good thing to focus on, that gratitude and the positive aspects. So I think that's a huge aspect for mental health. So I'm excited to bring out our guest, Paul. So before we bring out our guest, let's touch on our sponsor. So our sponsor from the beginning of the show has been Frontline Standard, and Frontline Standard is a patriotic apparel company based out of Texas. And you can check out their products on Amazon, Etsy, Facebook, and Instagram. And if you send them a direct message on Facebook or Instagram and you mention the show, the Actions and Limits podcast, you can get 35% off your entire order. So again, thank you to Frontline Standard for continuing to be our sponsor. And so let's bring in our guest, Paul. I'm excited to have him. I know you and I have both been checking out his content. So Matt Zinman is the author of Z-isms, Insights to Live By. And Matt is a difference maker driven to positively impact 100 million people by 2025. And his book is based on his experiences as an entrepreneur, athlete, single parent, caretaker, and nonprofit founder. Matt is also the CEO of the Internship Institute, which he established to make experience matter. So everyone welcome out Matt Zinman. All right, Matt, welcome to the show, man. We're excited to have you on the Actions and Limits podcast. Happy to have you, man.
Thank you. It's great to be with you guys. I've been looking forward to it.
Yeah, I know Paul and I have been checking out your content, some of the videos. I wanted to hear a little bit about, these Z-isms you talk about. If you can go into that a little bit for us, for the audience, what is that? Sure.
Well, that usually is the natural question with the title of the book. What is a Z-ism? And they are, as the subtitle goes, insights to live by, and has less to do with me as really everybody. Has their mantras and credos and things that they are principles that are guiding for them or advice that they give other people. So the idea is to invite people who read the book to to share theirs as well as a learning community.
Matt, what's your background? How did you get to this point writing this book of Z-isms? I'm sure there's a lot of life lessons that you've learned to be able to write this book. I'm sure, this isn't just out of the blue. I'm sure this is a lifelong dream for you. So
Sure.
Take me back to how you got started and go from there.
Yeah, great. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of life involved here, Paul, to say the least. I am from Philadelphia and have been here always, and just north of the city here. And I went to Temple University, and a common thread for me throughout my life is playing ice hockey. I've done that since 6-7 years old, and just the playing on Team USA in my mid-teens, and then with Temple going undefeated and captaining and spending my summers training in Canada, right? That just, if you're gonna play at that level, it dominates a lot. I still play to this day into my 50s, more beer league now, but that's okay. Beer league is just fine by me. And on the career side, I came out of Temple with a journalism degree, went into marketing, communication, PR, and worked on the agency side with consulting with many clients, probably over 100 through those years, and then went out on my own in 2002, which was another big intersection for me. In addition to starting my own company, which was Z Communication, no surprise there, I guess. I also got divorced. I had my son Jake was very young. He was 2. So half the time, that I had him, man, diapers and bottles and baby, and then back to his mom's and, put my head down and get the company going. And then that kind of business is more professional services. So you're billing by the hour. It's tough to get ahead. And that was the time when it was like bricks and mortar versus virtual. Now the pendulum has swung all the way.
Sure.
But back then I was way ahead of that curve, and it didn't necessarily serve me well. And internships, which the area that I went into next, I founded a company and then transitioned it into a nonprofit called the Internship Institute, which I've worked ever since, about the past 15 years. And it was something I'd always been very involved in. I had for myself. It got me into my career, always going back and talking to the local colleges and universities, and running the programs for former employers, doing it for my own company. And it just seemed like it aligned well with with my passion and skills and what seemed to be a market need. And the last thing there is the focus is on employers in terms of setting up the programs and making sure that they don't stink, as some do. So that's my job, is to make sure they don't. And then the book, really, I have been wanting to write it for at least 10 to 15 years, right? I mean, just framing that different kinds of journeys that I had overlaying. There's a lot of life lessons and concepts that I felt were important, right? We all talk about, well, yeah, I have a book in me, I want to write a book. And it's been kind of a thorn in my side. And I asked myself the question recently, like obviously, about a year and a half ago, what would I regret not doing? It's kind of at that, my son's now, in college, I'm in that transition, what's this next step for my life? And that was the intersection point for me. And I just decided to put my head down and, the past year, and here I am with you guys. I'm just,
man, I love that question. I think we should all ask ourselves that, like, what would I regret not doing? It's turning that fear on its head, right? Instead of saying, like, what am I afraid to do? What am I afraid to not do? Man, that literally gave me chills, man. I literally thinking about that question. I'm like, man, that hit.
Well, if you got to, the chapter, the book culminates around defining your why and getting into action and a whole framework around personal development. So around the chapter about winning the battle within, Justin, that's where you'll find that question, among others.
So now, do you have now a separate business from the internship to more of a personal development concept coaching, or how's that all work?
Sure. Well, for me, I'm still doing work for the nonprofit. I've actually doing a presentation about 80 colleges tomorrow and some employers. So that's still, I'm not doing grants, so it's not consuming me. I really want to turn my attention as much as possible to what I'm continuing to do with the book. And I do not have a coaching business. This was not something I wrote with respect to others who write books as a business card of some sort. I positively impact as many people as possible. And then in recent weeks, I'm trying to let it unfold a little bit as well, as I kind of get my footing, right? At this point, it's almost like the book was the easy part in knowing what to do. And, that naturally led me to being here. But I also just decided to start my own podcast a couple weeks ago. So I'm on a fast track to figure all that out. Maybe you guys can spend some time with me after.
Yeah, we'll give you some insight.
So I'll take all the insights I can get. Some insights to live by on podcasting, Justin and Paul.
Yeah, we've gone through a lot of different little hiccups along the way. So I think we've got a little bit of insight there. But no, that's exciting, man. So what's the name of your podcast?
Insights to Live By.
Insights to Live By. I like it, man.
We're gonna keep it consistent. And to the earlier part of the conversation, I want to have guests on and interview them about the kinds of things that we just described. What I'm going to put one of you guys on the spot. I'm going to turn the tables on you real fast. What would be a guiding principle for each of you that is advice that you repeatedly give or something that you rely on? It doesn't have to be original. It's just, what is that to you?
You want to go first, Justin, or do you want me?
Go ahead, Paul.
Okay. For me, it's perspective. Keeping things in perspective. When I'm in a low state, because we all have our good days and bad days. Right. And if I'm in a low state, I think about the things that are good in my life and really focusing on those things that are good. And that kind of transforms my mood. So I try to do that each morning. So I start off my day on the right foot by thinking about, I have a good family, I've got a good support system, and focusing on what's good and not focus so much on the bad that could come up.
That's awesome. I mean, that's definitely a major point that we're of the same mindset there. All right, Justin, you're on the hot seat.
Yeah, Paul gives me crap for this one, but it's stop lying to yourself. We talk about the things that we want to do or we're trying to do or planning to do. Right. We give ourselves a way to say that failure is okay. So it's really monitoring the language that we use, either in our head or out, like when we're speaking to each other, and monitoring what we're saying. So instead of saying, I'm going to try to do that, you either say, I will do it, or I am going to do that.
Right. And that matters a lot. Paul, you're a good friend. I just want to acknowledge.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So I'm tempted to drive this podcast and keep the tables turned, but I guess I'll have to put myself back on the hook.
You'll have to have us on your show, man.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that would be great. What you guys just talked about really is the grounding, the foundation of the book. So we talk about several filters, one being earned confidence, which I'll come back to in a moment. Another being mood health, which you alluded to just now. And then the other is perception itself. And that perspective, that objectivity, that reminding ourselves that we have so many moving parts in our lives at all times. we assume everything we encounter is the truth, but it's always just an interpretation. So it's about giving yourself the benefit of the doubt, giving others the benefit of the doubt, and just keeping that perspective. So
You
that
know,
was a good answer.
all those filters that we put our life through, right? You know.
That's exactly right. It is. And should I keep diving in on those
Well,
points?
well. Let me ask you this question here.
Sure.
How did you, because your background is something kind of different. I'm sure everything connects in some way. But
Right.
how did you come up with this perspective? Did something happen in your life personally that molded you to this point, or how did that all come about?
Well, the short answer is there's a lot of hard living, by the time you get into your 50s, and everybody has been through their own ringer, and there's nothing to compare one to the other, but I've just had my certain sense of experiences across the board. And, by example, in writing the book, I felt it was important to put out some personal disclosures that had remained very private. It's written as though I'm having a personal conversation with the reader. So that, that goes hand in hand. So, there's a number of things that came up, and I'll just put them in relative order. One is that I had to contend with depression since my early teens. And that's something that, once you have to contend with that, you never stop contending with it to make sure that you stay in a positive framework. And another big one for me when my early 20s was my mom was in a routine surgery, and she got unscreened blood and contracted HIV in the early days. So there was a decade of caretaking there, and then being an entrepreneur the past 18 years, founding the nonprofit, being in the career space with the Internship Institute, and just going deep in that whole space. It all kind of adds up, and there's more to it than that, that we might get to here, but those are some of the major things that would impact anybody, of course.
I think Paul and I talk about that. There's those moments in our lives that are really, shake you to your foundation, but there's always a lot of growth that comes out of that once you really hit that bottom. So
yeah, for sure. Yeah, we could throw relationships in there, the divorce in there.
Yeah.
So let's go back to the depression, because a lot of people deal with depression. Everybody does it in some form of way, some worse than others.
Right.
How did you, and as a teenager, that's tough because you're constantly thinking about what other people are thinking about you. You're very conscious of what's going on. More, when you have more experience, you develop more confidence. So talk to me, as a teenager dealing with depression, because, that's a tough thing. And then going forward, like you said, this is a battle that you're going to have the rest of your life. So what have you done to help yourself?
Right. Well, I'm really glad that of all the things that we could talk about, I'm really glad that you're homing in on this, because it is something that is very timely right now. And I'll answer your question in a minute. I'm not dodging in any stretch, but just to put things in context, with many people losing their structure with COVID, the numbers around unemployment don't lie. And even if you're not somebody who has to contend with a chemical imbalance, I didn't inherit the best gene pool. That's a different matter, but you are still susceptible right now. Mm-hmm. And there are, the same kinds of practical techniques, which I'll also come to keep myself healthy, are the same kinds of things that I want to encourage people to do as well. So going back to the origin of your question, my mom was a depressive, my dad was bipolar. It feels like it's racking up when I say it all at once. I guess it is. But, all those things have a role in, caretaking for them, recognizing it within myself. I would say that I didn't necessarily realize in the moment in my early teens what was happening. I was low, I was sluggish, there was some loneliness in there. Hockey, again, was a great thing for me to be in touch with friendships and remain confident in the caliber of play I was at the time. So it was really in my early 20s that I probably really started being more proactive about what I needed to do to take better care of myself. And, if you're, the thing with depression or any kind of mood disorder or, anything in that spectrum is that people dance around it, even today. And what I felt it was important to write a chapter in there about mood health. And there's a whole mood scale that it was important to take it head on. I mean, the brain is part of the body. And I don't really think that there's anybody, either individually in their life or certainly not within their immediate family, who hasn't had to deal with a mental health event of some sort at some point. It's just life. And so I think that it's beyond time for us to be very much in the open with it. And I hope that I'm doing my part to contribute. May I keep going?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Okay, I don't want to go in this long, but
You're good. You're good, Matt.
There's more to it. So in that area, in the chapter called around mood health, there's this mood scale, and it's kind of like a thermometer. You don't have to see it to really understand, but you've got that perfect center, right? That no one is really ever at for too long. But there's that range that you would describe as normal. Again, however you define normal, happy, normal, sad, and then naturally with depression, it's mild, moderate, severe, and then you can go up. And like with my dad with bipolar, you can go hypomania, up to the edge of madness. So certainly there's a lot more to mental health than that scale, but that's something that has really been very practical for me, because I know if I start sinking, which it's also sometimes very difficult to even know you are depressed right at first in that mild state. What is this sluggishness? That if I go like a day here, bad weather, punch in the gut, or 2 days, that's going to happen. But when I get to a third day, it's like sinking in quicksand. I mean, deeper. I mean, that's the experience, how I would describe it, since I just did. And the point being, I can't let myself sink any lower, because that's how much harder it is to get out. So I take action. I work out. I just don't give myself a choice, as much harder as it is. I create structure. I don't let myself lay around. I reach out to friends who lift me up, and on and on and on. Those sorts of things. Because if you've been in the real depths of it, it's, that you never want to feel that way again. So that's certainly a motive to take action.
Yeah, those are a lot of, good steps for people to take. And, there is science to back a lot of that, right? Working out, gets those endorphins going, get your brain, those mood enhancers. And then being around people, it's the same kind of thing. So you're putting yourself in those places to be able to get yourself out of that funk. The biggest thing is recognizing it, and I think admitting what's going on, because a lot of people don't want to admit to it, because there is a social stigma around depression and mental health. It's like, no, I can't admit to myself that something's wrong with me, so they don't seek solutions.
Right. And then if they ignore it, then they sink even lower. And again, it's that much harder to get out. But you know what, to your point, Justin, if there's any silver lining to COVID in this specific topic, it's that telehealth is now available like it wasn't before. So the stigma being there, that whole, like, I've got to make that extra call or find that other doctor or go, lay on the proverbial couch. You can get pretty much an immediate eval and talk to a professional who can really, take you through the intake and let you know where you are and what you need to do to take action. That would be the first step. And you can do that in private. So as opposed to, being concerned someone knows that you're, what I mean? If you're embarrassed about it.
Yeah.
So I really think that that's very important for people to make that phone call.
Yeah, that's good. And like you said, it's another tool that's being utilized more often. So yeah, that's a super good tool out there. I wanted you to talk about that confidence part again. What did you call it in the book?
Right. So earned confidence.
Earned confidence.
That's chapter 1. It's at the foundation of the book, and things build on one another. So I refer to it throughout. And it goes to something that Paul was saying at the very beginning, where people think of confidence in different ways. And this is very specific. Earned confidence is basically the simple fact that everyone has been through everything they've been through, and we're still here. I mean, I know that sounds very oversimplified, but the logic to it is to remind ourselves that there's no need to worry. There's no need to be anxious and experience the negativity around and stress around the things that haven't happened yet. And people who are in that habit of worrying have, need to break that habit for a number of different reasons. Not the least of which, if for example, you're in that habit and you don't realize it until after the fact that what it was you were worried about never happened, you have to then do that 2020 and be like, well, what did I do to myself? What did I do to anyone else that I might have expressed the worry to? Because we're also talking about that energy transfer, and that we do have a personal responsibility in terms of how we affect other people, and the mindfulness of knowing how others affect us.
No, for sure.
I want to touch something that in your story you talked about. You didn't say it, and you didn't say it, but I'm thinking it. Being vulnerable. You were a hockey player, tough guy, right? I mean, that's the stereotype of a hockey player, a tough guy, right? And you said in your early 20s you realized I have depression, and the fact that you were vulnerable enough to say to somebody, hey, I need help. And I'm sure as a hockey player, tough guy, shrug it off, bruises I get out on the ice. The fact that you were strong enough inside to say, you know what, something's wrong and I need to seek help. So I commend you for that. And can you go over how that all came about?
Yeah, I mean, naturally with the mood scale, you're going to hit different levels, and there was a point in my early 20s, and there's been any number of them since as the years add up, when I've been in that moderate to severe depression, and I wouldn't wish it on anybody. I mean, it's about as bad of a feeling as you can have. And so you have to take action. It's either have months and years blink by. You really can lose time, and so and I did, and it comes to a point where you certainly recognize something's wrong, but you also recognize that there's no, you have to pull yourself out, and I lost my brother David to this too. So you do get to the point where you think that the world is better off without you. And in fact, in that chapter, the suicide prevention number is in there as seriously as I, am certainly taking this, because it is that serious. And I think the one thing that's always been the reminder to me, because we're talking about, Paul talked about perspective, and even in that state, you're seeing the opposite of the rose-colored lenses, is to know that even if I'm feeling or thinking a certain way, that things will get better. I don't know what it's going to take. No. I certainly don't feel that way. I might not have the answer, but I know that I won't always feel that bad. And that to me actually was at times, a life preserver.
I think, yeah, I think this could be very helpful for a lot of people out there, and I really like your message, Matt, because, I saw it. So you may not know, I've been in law enforcement for, 14 years. And what I saw when the coronavirus really hit, like the first few weeks of the lockdown, was suicides went up tremendously. And I don't think that they're talking about that in the news very much, but it was a tremendous increase from, the daily average. And so definitely right now, and I'm sure people are still struggling with that, being isolated, being away from their families and loved ones, and being able to, or not being able to go and do the things that they're used to distract themselves from the depression that they may be in.
Right. And even if it's not, I mean, it's hard to kind of pinpoint one thing versus another because of that range, but I think a lot of people are also experiencing grief, and not necessarily in any relation to, and of course there could, as the numbers climb, but I'm really talking about, in this case, the loss of the things that we love to do that we can't do any longer. And so that can kind of feel like depression in a way,
Yeah.
and to some degree that they intertwine, but you really shouldn't ignore that either. It's like, you know what, this sucks, you know,
Yeah.
not being able to go see my friends or any of that, and just confront it so that you can just put everything in context and perspective.
So if people, you know, I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that have these thoughts, and it's okay to have these thoughts, but we need to do something about it. If you know, somebody has suicidal thoughts, what would you recommend these people do? And I mean, obviously, call the hotline is
Right.
definitely one thing, but is there anything else that they should be doing?
Yeah, you know, absolutely. And quite honestly, you know, it's one thing to write it in the book, and it's a whole other, you know, aspect to be talking about it. And I'm really glad to have the opportunity to you know, continue to focus on this topic. And there is more of an answer here, and that is, you know, if you get to the point where you just simply are questioning that you might not be able to keep yourself safe, and maybe you just don't have anyone in your life you think can help you, that's one of the times, you know, to call the telehealth or the actual suicide hotline number. But the other thing is, if you're clinically depressed, if you're dealing with a true chemical imbalance, and that's what it is, we're talking about brain chemistry in a lot of cases, and certainly circumstances
Yeah.
contribute to that. Just the same as working out is the endorphins, the circumstances can have the opposite effect.
Sure.
I recommend you, as hard as it is, and as much of a stigma, and to some degree rightfully so, you got to check yourself inpatient. You have to, because you can't get the appointments fast enough that you need to see someone outpatient.
That makes
So
sense.
you need, because you're dealing with medication now, so you have to have, you know, you have to put up with anything else, but you know, you have to have the close care of you know, a doctor who really knows, you know, the medications, because it can be a crapshoot with those. And that's, you know, you really need to keep yourself safe. That's the place to go.
Yeah, and we've had a guest talk about that before, Gabe Howard. He actually talked about how it took him 4 years to get on the right medication. So, you know, it's a long process to go through, so it's not a quick fix.
Right.
So it's definitely something, you know, if you can't schedule it, you know, like you said, go in and talk to somebody.
And it is hard, you know, there's, you know, who wants to feel that way for a day, let alone whatever it takes for something to kick in. And, you know, again, I do think it's a good theme on this to put things in perspective. We all go through dark periods in our lives,
Mm-hmm.
and there's no other way but through, as is the case with all kinds of things in the, you know, trials and tribulations of life. But you just put that in perspective. I've got a whole life,
Sure.
and these next number of months are just gonna, you know, not be the best, and you're just going to have to fight your way through and work out when you can and get your endorphins up, and do the things that you can do naturally you know, the medications don't do it by themselves. So yeah, you have to push yourself into those things as well to, you know, just feel better, period.
As an entrepreneur, have you changed your business model since the COVID came out, or are you kind of just business as usual type?
Well, you know, where the nonprofit is concerned, I'm not really, on one hand, there's not a lot of internships happening. On the other, I am in some demand because some of my specialty is on virtual internships. I've been doing it for 20 years. And, you know, I train on that, and that is what I'm training on tomorrow. So I think the colleges and universities are trying to figure out how to shift, you know, the academic credit bearing internships typically are not permitted to be virtual. And so they have to make it, and that's, you know, not an easy switch for a college. It's like the
Sure.
most change adverse culture on the face of the planet, to get them to, you know, make that shift. So I'm trying to move that needle for them, but my focus is really, and, you know, of course, in writing the book, I, you know, couldn't have known in starting it, but I'm trying to focus on the book and push in that direction as much as possible. And honestly, there's no two ways about it. I mean, even with the 15 years into the internship space, it's about the hardest thing I could have possibly imagined trying to do. And I do have that sense of responsibility, and I am going to see those things through. But I've never felt like I'm swimming with the current, and I've never been happier, quite honestly, in even though it's early on here, just to have the opportunity to be here and get real and know that, someone's on the other end of the microphone here, hopefully benefiting from the conversation. I mean, that's what really, drives me.
Yeah. And I can tell it hits home with you, the topic, like you said, you've dealt with a lot of things in your life and, gone through that struggle. So being able to share that's got to be, really powerful to be able to put that out there.
Yeah, I keep expanding the comfort zone. I think you guys definitely did that today, which I appreciate. I really do. We went into some areas I hadn't gone before, and I'm okay with it.
Okay. Well, we appreciate you going there with us.
Yeah, exactly.
Sure.
What about your work-life balance? I think you mentioned you just got remarried a few years ago.
Right.
You have a kid in college. How do you do the the work with the business, personal? How do you bring it all together?
Yeah, I actually kind of follow more energy management than time management. If I'm sitting in front of the computer and I can't write a cohesive sentence, I'll go do laundry, and my wife and I have another business with a company called Isogenics. She's a certified health coach, and that's not the topic today, but that certainly is a major support for us. And we did put away for my son, and we're trying to figure out with COVID actually whether to have him take classes elsewhere, because like what's a class virtually somewhere else versus actually being on campus. So we're waiting to get that news. That's an adjustment, but I don't on one hand, like I do like to put my head down and go for the grind and get as much done and be productive and all that. But I do know when to pick my head up and not, I know my limits. So it's just about knowing yourself. And sometimes I do just like not work for however long.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, Matt, what projects are you working on right now? Like, how can our viewers and listeners get a hold of you if they want to check out your content?
Yeah, thank you. Well, the website for the book and soon to be podcast is zisms.com. It has the hyphen or Z if you're somewhere international, not to be confused on, but it's still Z. We're going to go with the American pronunciation. But there's a free sample of the book on the website. It's also naturally on Amazon. The reviews are on Amazon. So the only thing that I can ask for as a call to action is to go check it out, read the first part, see if you like it, and you'll know if you want to keep reading. I did lay down, I'm trying to get more defined. And so with the podcast, and that is really my major project right now to figure it all out.
Sure.
But I just started saying that I'm determined to positively impact 100 million people by 2025.
I love it.
However that may be. So I'm really liking going with the current here and letting things unfold and also and driving it.
Well, that's great.
Thanks, guys.
I got some Philadelphia questions for you, just a little lighthearted stuff. I'm from Southern California, so
Okay.
I've been to Philadelphia twice in my life, okay? So I'm coming from a tourist, okay? So these questions, I know for somebody that lived there all their life, you're like, okay, whatever. But for me, it's interesting. So first question I want to ask you is Gino or Pat's?
Jim's, but I will go with Gino's.
Okay.
Jim's on South Street. If you're coming to Philly, that is the best cheesesteak.
Okay, and then you kind of answered my second question. Okay. So if I go there, if I go back to Philadelphia, I need to find Jim's. That's the place to go to. Is that what you're saying?
It's a matter of taste. You might get different answers from different Philadelphians, but that is my go-to when I'm in the city.
Okay. He's heading back. He wants to get
yeah, it's by Penn's Landing. It's down by Penn's Landing. On South Street, which is
how far away is that from the Rocky Steps?
That's the opposite side of town.
Oh, okay.
But it's not that big a town. It's walkable.
Yeah.
But yeah, exactly.
Well, awesome, Paul. You got somewhere to go next time you go out there.
Yeah, exactly.
Check it out.
So, just let me know. When you said that, I was like, are you going to talk about snowballs thrown at Santa Claus, or I'm going to have to answer for the city. So,
and then did you play hockey with Eric Lindros? Is he even from there? I don't know. I know he played for the Flyers, but did you play hockey with him?
Yeah. in a way, no, mainly not. But one
Yeah.
game, we did a Flyers alumni game, and they do it for charity. And so the Temple alumni hockey players played the Flyers alumni, and different story. But if you know Dave Schultz, who's like the big bruiser from the early '70s, basically he's called the Hammer. I can't remember why exactly, and this would be why he broke a stick over my head.
Oh, geez.
In that game.
And in a friendly alumni game?
Yeah, I guess I might have gotten chippy or something, but like, come on, you're Dave Schultz. Like, really? I'm the guy you got to pick on. This is what your career has gotten to. That's probably, I don't know if I said that before or after, but
that's funny.
It's an experience.
That's funny, Matt. Well, we always like to ask our guests too, with the title of the show, Actions and Limits. What would you say is one action that we can implement into our lives right now to make a big difference? And what's one limit that we can remove to make a big difference?
Wow. I love the question. So there's a lot of ground. I'm really glad we went deep on mood health. But when I'm asked the question about the most practical aspect and action for the book, it's to be nothing less than kind to yourself, which is kind of what you guys were talking about earlier too. But what I like about it is it's the yes or the no. It's not like, do I love myself? Don't I love myself? I'm working on myself. It's very concrete in every single given situation. It's your compass. And if whatever is happening, does it reflect my being kind to myself or not? And if people follow that, I think that compass will head them in the right direction. So that's hopefully the most practical action that I hope people find. Limits. I don't really have much of a limiting belief.
What do you see in the people that you deal with, like with other people's limiting beliefs? One that stands out as one that needs to be removed.
I think that where I'll go with this, it's just off the cuff, is that I think, we're all a work in progress, and you have to know what's achievable for you. So I guess the limit is not to try and take too many steps at a time that will put you in a position of stopping, and just do things in manageable chunks, which is exactly, the recommended approach here. I'll go with that.
I like it. Yeah, it's okay to say no, right? Don't take on too many tasks at one time. So.
Well, and the goals you set for yourself, to make them achievable and be forgiving, and just keep getting back on track if you ever get off. My phone rules my life. I have to carve that hour out. So there's the other action. Sure. You don't do that. Set alerts for gratitude, and then carve an hour out in the morning for whatever that is to you. Everybody can do that.
I like that, Matt. Well, again, thank you so much for coming on the show. We are glad to have you. Thanks for sharing your insight and getting into, like you said, some deep topics there. So we really appreciate you coming on, Matt.
Thanks for having me, guys. Thanks to your listeners as well.
All right, Paul, what a great guest. I was glad to get Matt on the show. I know we went, a little deep there. What was your biggest thoughts on what Matt was sharing?
Yeah. Well, obviously I didn't want to make him feel uncomfortable, but he was talking about topics that a lot of people suffer from. Mm-hmm. And I want to let people know that it's okay to ask for help. That's the right thing to do. And don't feel, that you're abnormal because you're asking for help. You're actually doing the right thing for asking for help. So that's why I kind of wanted to dive in with him, because he's an expert on dealing with that. So he gave some great advice, and if anybody is suffering from stuff like that, hopefully you can follow what he told us.
Yeah. We've had a couple of guests on the show before share some experiences, and it's really about breaking that stigma around, mental health and depression, and being okay with asking about it. Because I know the stats are pretty staggering. It's something, and I may be misquoting, but it's about 1 in 4, 1 in 5 people suffer with depression. So it's you're not alone. There's a lot of people out there. There's a lot of resources, and I like what Matt talked about is doing the things to get yourself out of it, whether it's working out, being with friends, doing some type of activity to pull yourself out of it when you feel yourself slipping into it. So great guest. I was glad to have him, on the show and sharing his insight. So awesome. So let's wrap the show up with another segment of Ask Paul Anything. I found a little bit of a lighter question, to wrap up the show. So this is from Beth in Florida, and she asked, Paul, what has been your funniest time with a client?
What has been the funniest time with a client? Okay, I got one. This is pretty funny. I was doing a Zoom call with a client, and I'm flowing, like we're talking, and I'm flowing for a good 5 minutes on what he was asking about, and I'm going. I don't think it was 5 minutes, but it was a long time, right? And I'm like going, and then I hear, hey, I'm sorry, I didn't catch any of that. I'm like, oh man, I was flowing. I was really getting into it, this and that, and they didn't catch any of it. So it was kind of a funny little thing, because he's like, I could see that you were really intense about what you were saying to me, but I had no idea what you were talking about because the audio went out. So that's probably a funny thing that happened.
That's rough. That's rough. You're like, man, I gave you so much good information, and now I can't repeat it.
Yeah, exactly. It's never as good the second time you say it, because you're like, flow, yeah. So I think that would probably be the number one thing.
That's good. You can laugh about it. That's good. You're like, oh my gosh, come on. Yeah. He should have been like flagging you down, like, hey, I can't.
He was, but I was so in the zone with it. He's like, dude, I want to hear what you're saying, man. Like, I see the intensity of what you're saying. I want to hear it. So.
Well, that's funny, Paul. Well, great show. Glad to have Matt on the show with us and sharing his insight. And man, another great episode, Paul.
For Justin Atherton, this is Paul Fortune. We'll see you next week.
All right. See you next Monday. Thank you for listening to the show. Don't miss an episode. Click and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on your favorite podcast platform, and find us on Instagram and Facebook under Actions and Limits to stay updated on all our upcoming content. Continue to email the show at actionsandlimits@gmail.com for our segment Ask Paul Anything. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next week.